Stop telling people to vent while they're at work, thinking that it's going to emotionally support them. Do this instead. Today we're going to look at venting and how that is not good in the workplace. There are much better ways to actually cope with emotional situations like that. So you know what it looks like when somebody comes in, they have something that's upset them, and they're just like, I just need to vent to you for a few minutes. And they want to do this because they want to let their emotions out. They don't want to just shove them down, which is correct. You don't want to do that. That would be bad. That leads to explosions and things later. And I'm not a psychologist, but I think most people understand the problem with that. But you let them go on for a while and they go over the problem and you're like, oh my man. And you start supporting them in that and saying, yeah, that happened and that was bad and you're in the right. And you feel like you've bonded. But then once you're kind of through that venting session, that person goes back to their desk and they don't feel lighter. They actually feel heavier, and it will still bother them and they'll keep looping through it in their head. So what we need to do is come up with a better way of handling this frustration or those things that really bother you. First, there's a distinction between processing something and venting. Processing is when you say, I'm upset, I need perspective, and I need to choose a next step. That's a much healthier way than saying, I'm upset and I want to go over this with you and replay it and get us all upset together. Venting is usually unstructured, it's repetitive, and it's contagious. And it spreads the emotion out without providing clarity or next steps. So we don't want to confuse emotional expression, which is, shoving stuff down, with emotional resolution. So just not letting you're not shoving stuff down, you're actually expressing it, but you're going to tie it to that resolution. So a lot of people tie venting with, if I just get it out, I'm going to feel better. Psychologist Brad J. Bushman studied it, and he said that venting to reduce anger is like putting gasoline on a fire. It's only going to feed the flame. And this is vivid for several reasons. Venting keeps your brain locked in the threat narrative. It's going to keep going over what happened, what it means, that it's unfair, what you should have said, what you want to do now, and you're not going to be able to get out of that loop. In 2024, a review of anger management research did 154 studies with over 10,000 people. So this is pretty well researched. That's a lot of studies. The takeaway was basically methods that lower your anger arousal help more than the methods that are going to increase that arousal. And venting increases that arousal. This matters at work because your heart rate's going to go up, your certainty goes up, your flexibility goes down, and it can interfere with your work. And it can cause problems behind the scenes with office politics and things. So even in media interviews about the work, Bushman has been very blunt, and he said that venting is the worst thing that you can do when you're mad, adding more fuel to the fire. So if venting doesn't actually release the emotion, why does it feel so good? Venting feels good in the moment because it gives you validation, right? Someone's going to agree that you've been wronged. You're going to feel a sense of belonging, like those people agree with you, they support you, and you're going to not be the villain in the group. And then there's going to be that certainty that I'm right, they're wrong. And that gets into like failing forward. Did I handle a situation correctly? You don't ever want to feel like you failed at something. So having that support makes you feel better. But the problem is that the cost of this is going to show up later. So you rehearse the irritation until it becomes a habit in your head to keep going over this, and you train your brain to spot more evidence that you have every right to be mad. And that isn't really a good thing either, because you're training your brain to be mad about situations. And socially, you create a culture where, in order to connect, and the fastest way to connect with each other is by complaining. And that's not the start of a good, healthy culture at work. There's even a term for this venting loop. It's called co-rumination. And it's revisiting a problem over and over and focusing on negative feelings. Psychologist Amanda J. Rose defines co-rumination as extensively discussing and revisiting problems, speculating about problems, and focusing on negative feelings. In teens, co-rumination can look like processing, but it often becomes this collective stuckness where you're stuck in the problem and you never move on from that. So let's go over what you should be doing instead. What is healthy? How can you create a much healthier culture at work than doing venting? What you want to replace venting with is what we call structured support. So in 3 simple steps, you can move on to a much healthier approach. It's calm, clarify, and change. So the first thing you want to do is you want to bring your nervous system down a notch. And this is something that you'll have to explain to people. It's like, okay, we're going to move on and try not venting in our workplace. We're going to do a healthy workplace environment. First thing we're going to ask you to do is to look at how upset you are and try to bring it down a notch. And there's a lot of ways of doing this, and different methods work for different people. So you can, try mindfulness work, short walks, pause and label your feelings. There's a lot of breathing exercises, like 4 seconds in, 8 seconds out through pursed lips. You really need to have your employees go through and find what works for them. And then you can actually help remind them. It's like, okay, all right, you want to vent. What is it that you chose as your calming strategy? Have you done that? All right, now let's move on. So then that's step 1. Get yourself, just bring it down a notch a little bit. You're not going to be perfectly calm, but you can try to start that process. Step 2 is going to be to clarify. You're going to turn emotion into data. So psychologist Susan David has a phrase that I love. It's emotions are data, not directives. So just like anything else in business where we're collecting data and trying to separate out what is actual fact versus just what we feel like it is. And I run into that all the time with entrepreneurs where they think they know what's going on, and then we'll look at actual numbers and data in accounting, and it's something completely different. And so it's very important to collect data. Emotions are data. So instead of, can you believe what they did? You're going to look at, here's what happened. Here's what I'm feeling. Here is what I need to move on. So clarify. Here's what happened. Here's what I'm feeling. Here's what I need. And this is where you're going to ask a key question in order to do that. You're going to say, what type of support am I looking for by going to this person and talking to them about this issue? And there's usually 3 options that you can run through. Do I want you just to listen for 2 minutes so I can work through it myself in my head? Sometimes people just need to come up with the answers themselves, and that's really what they're going to need as support. And I've run into this a lot in my work where I'm in a problem and I can't figure it out, and I'll ask to meet with someone and I'll walk them through my spreadsheet or something, and then while I'm walking them through my spreadsheet, suddenly I'll see the answer and I'm like, oh, see, you helped me so much because I had somebody to walk through with this. And you're going to get that here as well. You're just going to talk about something, and as they're talking through it, they're like, oh, I should have done this. So sometimes you just need to listen for a couple minutes while they work through it. 2, do I want perspective? Do I want someone else to look at this and say, well, I can see where this person was coming from. I can see where you're coming from, and just help you develop the right perspective on what happened. Or 3, do I want help choosing a next step? So, I'm stuck with this problem after this interaction. I need some help figuring out what are my options on what I could do. What would be the most logical option for me to choose? So if you do that, if you ask that question, what kind of support am I asking for? That right there is going to stop the spiral. Step 3 change. So you're going to make a request and pick an action. So healthy processing is going to end with a next step. Venting never gets to this next step necessarily. Sometimes you get each other worked up. I'm sending this bad email or something, and then they go on with that. But really what you're trying to do is come to a logical best next step using a rational system here. So the next step might be just a direct conversation with somebody. It could be setting a boundary. It could be documenting an expectation, like this person fell through with this and I just need to write an email. Here's the expectations. Can we meet this? It could be asking your manager for just clarity on a decision that they made, like, okay, I'm not understanding this. Why did we decide to do this? Or choosing just to let it go because it's not with your energy. This is a big one for me. I have this belief after so many years of dealing with so many people, good people and bad people, that you have an unlimited number of people that you can love and care about. Like, that's an emotion that just feeds itself and it makes you feel freer and more calm to love someone. To be upset with somebody or to hate them, I think is limited. It causes so much bad stress in your body and it works you up that I swear you're going to hit a limit where you're going to spontaneously combust or have a mental breakdown or something. And you need to be aware of how much energy that you're spending on these negative emotions. And sometimes you just need to let it go, move on with life, really learn to laugh at stuff. As a speaker, I've learned to take bad situations and turn them into a funny moment that you can laugh about. And it is amazing what that does for your energy. So sometimes it's not with your energy. Let it go. And even better if you can laugh at it. But what you want to do here in this change section is you really want to make an action out of what's happening. You don't want to get stuck in that cycle of just getting mad about it. All right, so the language that you're going to use with your team when they come to you and start venting. There are some ideas here I just wanted to go over. One of them is if you're the one that's ready to vent, if you can catch yourself, you can say, hey, I'm activated. Can I get 2 minutes to say what happened? And then you can help me decide the next step, or I just need you to listen 2 minutes while I walk through the questions that we went through. So if it's you, it's a little easier because you can just tell people, I'm activated, I need to work through this. Can you just give me 2 minutes? If your coworker is the one who's receiving the vent, or you're the coworker who's receiving the vent, what you can say is, I'm here with you. Just to clarify, do you want me just to listen? Do you want me to help problem solve? Or do you want me to help you plan the next conversation? And that'll give you a little direction on where to go. Sometimes, like I said, you just listen and let them work through it. If the vent is turning into a loop, and so they really are just getting into this venting and it's going through it again and again, pause them, say, I'm noticing we're repeating the same points. So since we don't want to vent, we know that's not healthy. Hopefully you've had this conversation. And we want to really just do structured processing. What can we do in the next 24 hours that might help with this? Is it something that needs a solution or we need to have a conversation on those items that we went through before? Or is it something that we need to do mindfulness practicing and just let it go? But really asking that question, what do we need to do in the next 24 hours is going to help them flip to problem solving in their head. If it's turning into gossip, which is horrible and can turn into office politics as well, if it's going somewhere it shouldn't, you also need to pause and say, okay, I want to be careful. So if it's turning into gossip, we're talking about someone who isn't here. What conversation do we need to have with them to clarify this and move on? If you don't have a conversation, I've seen it so many times where people will talk about other people behind their backs. And this happens a lot in remote work where you guys are slacking or just writing quick messages and emails, is that the wrong emotions will get projected onto something, or there'll be a typo. And so it's read wrong. And what happens is you start talking about it and building it up and it becomes something that it's not. And then you take the emotions from that. And the next time something is posted, those emotions are then projected on to their next communication. So you have to be very careful about that. If you see something that might be offensive or might be interpreted the right way, pulling them into the conversation helps so much more. Plus, I've found that really when you care about people, then you do want to talk to them, and it lets them know that you care about them, and they can correct something or be like, oh, I'm sorry, I did not mean for that to come off that way, or how did I accidentally give that impression? Or they might remind you of a prior conversation. They pull someone else and say, I want to be careful. We're doing something that could get us into a bad social situation here. So these ideas are going to help protect the psychological safety of the employees and the people who need to vent and be involved in this, but it's also going to protect your culture in your firm so that you know that this isn't like when you're the one who's not in the conversation, you know what the others are actually doing as well. And so people feel a lot more calm. So in conclusion, venting feels like it's a relief, but it's not. It's reinforcing that stress response. You don't want to do that in your organization. Teams will feel like they're bonding over venting, but then you're normalizing negativity and you're learning to bond over a negative culture. That's not good. So the alternative is a structured processing where you're going to be calm, clarify, and change. So you want to go through those 3 steps. So then what I want you to do is for the next week, it kind of depends on how often it happens in your organization. So you can choose the time frame that would work. But let's say it's happening often enough that you can do it in a week. For the next week, rather than venting, I just say, no, I just need to vent. To those conversations where no, I just need to vent. I want you to say, and what I want now is. So add that sentence into that venting session. And then fill it in with, listen, perspective, a plan, a boundary, whatever you need to do there so that you're moving on to the next step and actually processing it. This is how you're going to keep a very good culture at work, and you're going to promote growth in your employees in a very good way. All right. If this episode helped, share it with a leader who cares about building up a healthier team climate. And follow, subscribe. We'll see you next time.